May 2, 1941, Baker Street, London. Rain hammered the blacked-out windows of a nondescript office building, while inside, a 35-year-old wooden-legged American woman with a limp and a price on her head sketched sabotage plans for Nazi-occupied France. Virginia Hall had never attended military academy, never received formal intelligence training, and never been considered suitable for any combat role by any government on Earth. The British Foreign Office had already rejected her application to join their diplomatic service because of her prosthetic leg. The American State Department had done the same. Yet here she sat, about to become Britain's most effective spy in France, planning operations that male officers insisted were categorically impossible for any woman to execute. Women cannot operate independently in hostile territory, declared the memo from MI6's leadership dated April 15, 1941. They lack the physical capability, the emotional stability, and the operational security discipline required for clandestine warfare. Female agents are a liability we cannot afford. The stakes were absolute. Nazi Germany controlled Europe from the Atlantic to Moscow. Britain stood alone, its armies expelled from the continent, its cities burning under the Blitz. Every week without actionable intelligence from occupied France meant more Allied ships torpedoed, more invasion plans compromised, more resistance fighters captured and executed. The casualty mathematics were brutal. Without eyes and ears inside France, any eventual Allied invasion would face entrenched German defenses with perfect intelligence on Allied movements. Military analysts estimated such an invasion would require 3 times the forces Britain and America could muster, with casualties exceeding 75%. What they didn't know was that within 3 years, 39 women would parachute and sail into Nazi-occupied France as Britain's secret weapons. They would organize resistance networks spanning thousands of fighters, blow up bridges hours before German reinforcements could reach Normandy beaches, and transmit intelligence that would save tens of thousands of Allied lives. These women would achieve what the entire British military establishment declared impossible: sustained, effective clandestine warfare in the heart of Hitler's fortress Europe. And they would do it while being hunted by the Gestapo, betrayed by collaborators, and dismissed by their own command structure as a desperate, foolish experiment. The story of how 39 impossible agents changed the course of World War II begins not with military planning, but with military failure on a scale that threatened civilization itself. By spring 1940, Hitler's Wehrmacht had accomplished what seemed impossible just months earlier. France fell in 6 weeks. The British Expeditionary Force evacuated from Dunkirk, abandoning equipment for 150,000 men. Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, all occupied. The speed of collapse shocked everyone. In September 1939, military experts predicted Germany would need 2 years minimum to conquer France. They did it in 42 days. The intelligence failure was total. Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, had failed to predict the invasion timing, route, or tactics. Their networks in France collapsed within days of German occupation. By June 1940, Britain had virtually no human intelligence sources inside occupied Europe. Every attempt to insert male agents had failed catastrophically. Between June 1940 and March 1941, 19 British agents were parachuted or sailed into France. 14 were captured within 6 weeks. Of those 14, 11 were executed. The survival rate was 26%. The conventional solutions failed with deadly consistency. First, MI6 tried using French refugees living in Britain. These men returned to their homeland only to be identified immediately. Their London clothes, their British cigarettes, their outdated slang gave them away. The Gestapo arrested them at train stations, in cafes, walking down streets. Second, they tried Dutch and Belgian agents. Same result. The Gestapo had informant networks so thorough that any stranger asking questions drew attention within hours. Third, they tried British officers who spoke French. These failed most spectacularly of all. No matter how perfect their French, their mannerisms, their bearing, their military confidence marked them as foreign. They couldn't disappear into occupied France because they couldn't stop being officers. The problem is operational presence, wrote Major General Sir Colin Gubbins in his confidential assessment dated November 3, 1940. Gubbins commanded the newly formed Special Operations Executive, the organization Winston Churchill created, with instructions to set Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. A male agent in France immediately draws attention. He must have work papers, explain why he's not conscripted for German labor, justify his movements. Every interaction is a security risk. Every checkpoint is potentially fatal. We need agents who can move freely, gather intelligence, and coordinate resistance without arousing suspicion. The human cost was accelerating beyond statistics. In Brittany, the Gestapo captured the entire Autogiro resistance network, 128 men and women, because one male British agent made a wrong turn and asked directions. In Paris, German counterintelligence destroyed the CART network after an agent's British-made shoes were noticed in a metro station. By December 1940, the Gestapo had arrested approximately 3,400 suspected resistance members. They executed 2,114 of them. The timeline pressure was existential. Churchill understood that Britain could not win the war alone. America's entry seemed distant, possibly impossible. The Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression pact with Germany. Britain needed to demonstrate that resistance, inside occupied Europe, was possible, that Germany was vulnerable, that fighting back could succeed. Without this proof, Allied morale would collapse, neutral nations would accommodate Hitler, and Britain's eventual defeat became mathematical certainty. Every failed agent mission brought the same chorus from military leadership. This approach is fundamentally flawed. Clandestine warfare in modern occupied territory is impossible. The Germans are too efficient, too thorough, too brutal. We cannot establish networks that survive. But one person disagreed. Virginia Hall grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, studied in Paris and Vienna, spoke French, German, and Italian fluently, and dreamed of joining the Foreign Service. In 1933, while hunting in Turkey, she accidentally shot herself in the left foot. The wound became infected. Doctors amputated below the knee. She named her prosthetic leg Cuthbert. The State Department rejected her application because of her disability. She tried the Foreign Service again. Rejected. She tried the British Foreign Office when war began. Rejected with a note. Physical disability makes applicant unsuitable for any posting. She was living in France in May 1940 when Germany invaded. She drove an ambulance for the French army during the collapse. She evacuated to Spain, then England. She walked into the Special Operations Executive Headquarters in January 1941 and volunteered for any assignment they had. The recruiting officer looked at her limp, at her background in languages and European culture, and saw something military planners had missed. The perfect agent wasn't a commando at all. Women could move through occupied France with far less suspicion than men. A woman traveling alone might be visiting family, working as a nurse, shopping for household goods. A woman asking questions could be gossiping. A woman loitering could be waiting for someone. The same behaviors that made a man suspicious made a woman invisible. And Hall had something else. She'd lived in France before the war. She knew the culture not as a foreigner learning it, but as someone who'd inhabited it. She understood how French people actually behaved, spoke, moved through the world. I watched Virginia Hall walk through our operational security tests in February 1941, Major Vera Atkins recalled in her 1974 memoir. Every male agent we trained moved through the streets like they were on patrol. Alert, scanning, ready. Hall moved like a Frenchwoman going to market. She complained about prices. She gossiped with shopkeepers. She became part of the landscape. And with her limp, she looked injured, vulnerable, non-threatening. The Gestapo would be looking for dangerous people. She looked like a victim. Hall believed, despite every rational argument against her, for a simple reason. She'd been underestimated her entire life. The State Department thought disability meant incapability. The Foreign Office thought women couldn't handle difficult postings. Every institution that rejected her had confused limitation with incompetence. She'd spent a decade watching people dismiss her based on assumptions that proved wrong when tested. She suspected, correctly, that military establishments were making the same mistake about women in warfare. The prototype mission began on March 23, 1941, when SOE leadership authorized Hall's deployment to France with catastrophically limited support. She received no parachute training because women weren't allowed in parachute training. She received no weapons training because women weren't allowed in weapons training. She received no radio operation training because women weren't allowed in radio training. She received a false passport identifying her as a New York Post correspondent, $500, a single emergency contact address in Lyon, and instructions to observe and report. Hall sailed from Portsmouth to Lisbon, then traveled by train through Spain to France. She arrived in Vichy, France on August 23, 1941, the nominally independent zone that collaborated with Nazi Germany. She had her journalist credentials, basic French documents, and Cuthbert. That was it. Within 3 weeks, she'd established contact with 12 resistance groups. Within 2 months, she'd created the first sustained intelligence network in occupied France that transmitted regular reports back to London. Within 6 months, she'd organized successful sabotage operations against German communications infrastructure. The exact methodology she developed would become the template for all future female SOE operations. Her first report reached London on September 4, 1941. It contained detailed German troop movements through Lyon, locations of Gestapo offices, names of key collaborators, and assessment of which resistance groups were reliable versus which were compromised by German infiltration. The report included 17 specific pieces of actionable intelligence, 13 of which were confirmed accurate by other sources. SOE leadership's reaction was documented in Major Nicholas Boddington's memo, dated September 9, 1941. Hall's report demonstrates capabilities that contradict every assumption about female agents' potential effectiveness. However, this may be an anomaly. One success does not constitute proof of concept. The skepticism cascade that followed Hall's early success revealed the institutional resistance to accepting that women could conduct warfare. At SOE headquarters, the debate wasn't about her results. Those were undeniable. The debate was about whether her success could be replicated, whether women generally had these capabilities, whether deploying more female agents was tactically sound or desperately reckless. The first layer of dismissal came from MI6 itself. Sir Stuart Menzies, chief of MI6, wrote to SOE's director on October 14, 1941. Miss Hall's preliminary success is noted, but MI6 maintains that female agents cannot sustain operations under Gestapo pressure. They will break under interrogation. They will compromise networks through emotional attachments. They will prioritize personal safety over mission completion. Female agents are tactically unsound. The second layer came from military hierarchy. General Bernard Montgomery, who would later command Allied ground forces on D-Day, responded to an inquiry about potential female agents with characteristic bluntness on November 2, 1941. Women have no place in combat operations. They lack the physical conditioning, the tactical judgment, and the moral certainty required to kill when necessary. They are a distraction to male soldiers and a liability to command structures. This is not prejudice. This is operational reality based on thousands of years of warfare. The third layer emerged from within SOE itself. Male agents who'd survived missions in France resented the suggestion that women could accomplish what they'd barely survived. Lieutenant Colonel Claude Dancy wrote in his classified assessment, dated December 17, 1941, "Hall succeeded because she's exceptional, not because women generally possess these capabilities. Deploying more female agents based on one success is like concluding that because one person survived jumping from an aircraft without a parachute, we should eliminate parachutes." The survival rate for male agents is 26%. For women, it will be lower. The fourth layer was structural. British military regulations explicitly prohibited women from combat roles. The Geneva Convention provided protections for female prisoners of war that didn't extend to armed combatants. If captured, female SOE agents would be treated as spies and executed, but their deployment would also create legal complications for Britain's treatment of prisoners. The War Office Legal Department argued that deploying female agents violated international law and exposed Britain to accusations of barbarism. Every layer of opposition shared the same foundation. Women couldn't sustain the physical hardship, couldn't make lethal decisions under pressure, couldn't compartmentalize emotions, couldn't maintain operational security, and couldn't survive Gestapo interrogation. These weren't casual prejudices. They were institutional certainties backed by military doctrine, psychological assessment, and historical precedent. But Virginia Hall continued sending reports. In October 1941, she arranged the escape of 12 British airmen shot down over France, moving them through safe houses to Spain and freedom. In November, she organized the first coordinated sabotage attack on German rail infrastructure, destroying switches that delayed troop movements by 17 hours. In December, she identified the double agent who'd compromised the Autogiro network, preventing similar betrayals. In January 1942, her network had grown to include 47 resistance fighters across 3 departments, with 3 separate radio operators transmitting intelligence daily. The bureaucratic battle for expanding female agent deployment began in earnest in February 1942, when Maurice Buckmaster, head of SOE's French section, formally proposed recruiting, training, and deploying 30 additional female agents. His proposal, dated February 11, 1942, argued, "Hall's sustained effectiveness over 5 months demonstrates that female agents possess operational capabilities that our previous assessments dismissed. More critically, German counterintelligence is focused on identifying male agents. They're not systematically screening women the same way. This is an exploitable vulnerability." The War Office rejected the proposal on February 27, 1942. The rejection memo cited concerns about moral standards, physical limitations, and precedent-setting consequences for women's role in British society after the war. Buckmaster found his champion in an unexpected place: Selwyn Jepson, SOE's recruiting officer. Jepson had interviewed hundreds of potential agents. He'd watched men with perfect credentials fail spectacularly, while people with no military background succeeded brilliantly. He understood that successful agents needed qualities that military training couldn't teach: language fluency that sounded native, cultural knowledge that felt lived in, the ability to improvise under extreme pressure, and most critically, the appearance of belonging wherever they went. "I conducted an unauthorized experiment in March 1942, Jepson admitted in his post-war testimony to Parliament in 1947. "I recruited 3 women, Yvonne Roudelat, Odette Sansom, and André Borel, without formal War Office approval. I told them the survival statistics. I told them about torture. I told them they would receive no official recognition if captured because Britain would deny their existence. All three volunteered anyway. The three women completed SOE's training program at special training schools in Scotland and England. The training was brutal. Physical conditioning, weapons handling, hand-to-hand combat, silent killing techniques, explosives, lockpicking, surveillance detection, interrogation resistance, emergency medical treatment, and most critically, deep cultural immersion in French daily life under occupation. Their instructors documented every aspect of their performance. The training reports, preserved in the National Archives and declassified in 1998, reveal institutional shock at female agents' capabilities. Captain Michael Foot's assessment of André Borel, dated May 8, 1942, stated, "Borel demonstrates exceptional physical endurance, better than 60% of male trainees. She completed the 40-kilometer forced march, carrying full equipment, in 7 hours, 23 minutes, faster than course average. She shows no hesitation in combat scenarios. She killed the training exercise sentry without pause or visible emotional response. She is, bluntly, a natural killer with better nerves than most men I've trained." Yvonne Rudella became the first female SOE agent parachuted into France on July 30, 1942. Her mission: establish a courier network in the Loir-et-Cher region and identify sabotage targets for D-Day preparations. She landed in a field outside Tours, buried her parachute and jumpsuit, changed into civilian clothes, and walked 17 kilometers to her safe house. Within 2 weeks, she'd recruited 19 local resistance members. Within a month, her network had conducted 3 successful attacks on German communications lines. Odette Sansom followed on November 2, 1942, landing near Caen. Her mission was to serve as a courier between resistance groups in southern France. She would eventually become one of the most famous SOE agents, captured and tortured, but never breaking under interrogation, surviving Ravensbrück concentration camp, and becoming the first woman awarded the George Cross. André Borel parachuted into France on September 24, 1942. She became a key organizer for the Prosper Network in Paris, one of SOE's largest and most effective operations. She would personally conduct dozens of sabotage missions before her capture in June 1943. The evidence accumulated across 3 validations. Hall sustained success over 18 months, the 3 new female agents establishing effective networks within weeks, and most compellingly, the comparative survival rates. By December 1942, of 13 male agents deployed to France since Hall's arrival, 6 had been captured, a 46% loss rate. Of 4 female agents deployed, 0 had been captured. The Germans weren't looking for female saboteurs because German military doctrine didn't believe women could be saboteurs. The forced institutional admission came on January 15, 1943, when the War Office authorized SOE to recruit and deploy up to 50 female agents for special operations. The authorization memo acknowledged, while the deployment of female personnel in combat operations remains unprecedented and carries substantial risk, operational results demonstrate effectiveness that outweighs theoretical concerns. But authorization was just the beginning. Scaling the operation meant solving problems no military had ever confronted. How do you mass-train female commandos in a society where women couldn't vote equally with men? How do you manufacture specialized equipment for operatives whose body dimensions didn't match any military standard? How do you deploy agents into territory where their capture means certain torture and execution? How do you maintain morale knowing you're sending women to probable death? The production obstacles started with basic equipment. Military parachutes were designed for men weighing 140 to 200 pounds, carrying 40 to 60 pounds of equipment. Female agents averaged 115 and 140 pounds. The parachutes dropped them too fast, causing injuries on landing. SOE's technical division spent 3 months redesigning chute specifications, conducting 47 test drops with weighted dummies before clearing modified parachutes for operational use. Weapons presented similar challenges. The standard SOE sidearm was the Welrod silenced pistol, designed for a male hand. Female agents with smaller hands couldn't reach the trigger while maintaining proper grip. The Lee Enfield rifle, standard for all SOE agents, was 44.5 inches long and weighed 9.1 pounds. Manageable for male agents but unwieldy for women under 5'6". SOE requested modified weapons from Royal Ordnance factories. The request was denied. Factories are operating at maximum capacity for standard military production. Custom weapons for specialized personnel cannot be prioritized. The solution came from American weapons. The M1911 pistol, while not silenced, fit female hands better. The M1 carbine, at 35.6 inches and 5.5 pounds, was light enough for smaller operators while maintaining adequate stopping power. SOE acquired these through Lend-Lease, classifying them as specialty equipment for resistance support operations, to avoid explaining why they needed women's weapons. Clothing was even more complicated. Female agents needed authentic French clothing to blend in. British clothing factories were producing military uniforms and civilian ration goods. Nothing matched French styles, fabrics, or construction methods. Every button, every zipper, every thread had to be authentically French, or agents would be identified by their clothes. SOE established a dedicated wardrobe department that employed French refugees to manufacture authentic French clothing using pre-war fabrics purchased in neutral Spain and Portugal. The distribution challenge was operational and psychological. Agents couldn't parachute directly into occupied territory with weapons and explosives. They needed to establish civilian cover first, then receive weapons and supplies through subsequent drops. This meant coordinating multiple flights, organizing ground reception teams to collect and hide parachute containers, and transporting weapons through German checkpoints to wherever the agent had established her cover identity. For every successful drop, there were 3 attempts scrubbed due to weather, German patrols, or reception team compromise. Agents often waited weeks for critical supplies. Nancy Wake, who parachuted into the Auvergne region in April 1944, spent her first month with only the handgun she'd hidden in her clothing. Her network needed explosives, weapons for 7,000 resistance fighters, and radio equipment. The supplies finally arrived on her 17th requested drop date, May 23, 1944, just 13 days before D-Day. Training requirements expanded beyond physical skills. Female agents needed to understand German military psychology in ways male agents didn't. A male agent caught at a checkpoint could attempt bribery, intimidation, or violence. Female agents needed to use gender assumptions against their captors, appearing frightened, confused, innocent, or flirtatious depending on the situation. This wasn't capitulation. It was tactical manipulation of enemy expectations. The training instructors developed specialized modules teaching female agents how to cry on command, how to appear intellectually confused while maintaining internal clarity, how to use apparent physical weakness to lower guard, how to flirt without suggesting availability, and how to shift instantly from apparent helplessness to lethal action. These weren't taught to male agents because male agents couldn't use them effectively. Field modifications emerged from agents' own innovations. Violette Szabo, deployed in April 1944, modified her courier bag to include a false bottom containing a .32 caliber pistol. When stopped at checkpoints, German soldiers searched the bag's main compartment, finding her papers, cosmetics, and shopping items. They never checked the reinforced bottom. After her capture in June 1944, German reports documented their surprise at finding the weapon. Female courier was armed with concealed pistol in manner not previously encountered. The timeline of scaling moved from individual agents to coordinated networks. Week 1. Single agent establishes cover identity. Week 2. Agent makes initial resistance contacts. Week 3 to 4. Agent vets contacts for security. Week 5 to 8. Agent establishes dead drop locations and escape routes. Week 9 to 12. Agent receives first supply drop. Month 4-5. Agent expands network to multiple cells. Month 6. Agent coordinates first major sabotage operation. By June 1943, 18 female agents were operating in France. By December 1943, 29. By March 1944, 37. By June 1944, D-Day, 39. Female agents had deployed into occupied France, with 32 still operational. The opposition conversion began with those closest to the operations. Squadron leader Hugh Verity, who piloted the Lysander aircraft that inserted and extracted agents, wrote in his logbook on August 14, 1943, "Flew Lise Villemeur out tonight. She brought intelligence on German troop positions that will save hundreds of Allied lives. When this war is over, people need to know that women fought it as much as any man. I've flown out male agents shaking with fear. I've flown out female agents laughing about the mission. Everything I believed about women in combat was wrong." Major Nicholas Boddington, who'd initially dismissed Hall's success as an anomaly, wrote in his classified report dated November 27, 1943, "Female agents have demonstrated operational effectiveness that exceeds male agents in several critical metrics. Their capture rate is 23% lower. Their network security is 40% better. Their operational longevity averages 2.3 times longer. Their intelligence quality scores 15% higher in accuracy ratings. The data compels a conclusion I resisted. For clandestine operations in occupied territory, female agents are not equal to male agents. They are superior." The institutional reversal came gradually, then suddenly. By January 1944, SOE wasn't debating whether to deploy female agents. They were debating whether to deploy only female agents. The discussion memo dated January 8, 1944, noted, "Male agents continue to serve critical functions, particularly in direct action operations. However, for intelligence gathering, courier operations, network coordination, and sustained clandestine presence, female agents have proven more effective. Future deployments should prioritize female agents when mission parameters allow." The decisive proof came not from training exercises or theoretical debates, but from combat itself. What happened in occupied France between D-Day and Liberation would force even the most skeptical observers to admit they'd been catastrophically wrong about what women could accomplish in warfare. May 27, 1944. A farmhouse outside Saint-Marcel, Brittany. 0342 hours. Pearl Witherington crouched in darkness, listening to German trucks approaching her position. The 30-year-old British agent who'd been a secretary in Paris before the war now commanded 1,500 resistance fighters, men who'd initially refused to take orders from a woman until she'd proven herself in combat. Tonight, German intelligence had learned about the resistance concentration. A full Wehrmacht battalion was moving to destroy them. Witherington had 47 minutes before the Germans arrived. Her resistance fighters were scattered across 3 square kilometers. Most were farmers and shopkeepers with minimal combat training. They had rifles, some grenades, and 3 Bren light machine guns delivered by SOE supply drops. Against them, 600 German soldiers with machine guns, mortars, and armored cars. She ran through the darkness, moving between position, organizing her fighters into the ambush formation she'd learned in SOE training. Place the machine guns on high ground with overlapping fields of fire. Position riflemen in defensive positions with clear retreat routes. Hold discipline until the enemy is fully committed. The German trucks rumbled closer, engines audible now, headlights visible through the trees. 0429 hours. The lead German truck entered the kill zone. Witherington raised her hand, waited. The entire convoy, 17 trucks carrying approximately 600 men, rolled into the valley. She dropped her hand. The night exploded. The Bren guns opened first, long bursts ripping through truck canvas and flesh. German soldiers tumbled from vehicles, screaming, dying, returning fire blindly into darkness. Rifle fire erupted from the hillsides, methodical and devastating. The Germans attempted to establish defensive positions, but Witherington's positioning meant they were exposed from 3 sides. The firefight lasted 23 minutes. When German reinforcements arrived, Witherington's fighters had already dispersed into the countryside, leaving 127 German soldiers dead or wounded, 6 trucks destroyed, and captured weapons including 4 machine guns and approximately 400 rifles. Witherington's after-action report, transmitted to London on May 28, 1944, was characteristically understated. Engaged enemy force at Saint-Marcel. Enemy withdrew. No friendly casualties. Captured equipment distributed to network, awaiting further instructions. The immediate results exceeded every metric SOE had hoped for. A female agent commanding resistance fighters had destroyed an enemy force more than 3 times her size in a conventional military engagement. The German battalion commander's report, captured after the war and declassified in 1982, revealed his shock. Ambushed by organized resistance with military-grade weapons and tactical discipline. Initial reports suggested partisan band. Subsequent investigation indicates operation was coordinated by British agent, reportedly female, though this seems impossible given tactical sophistication displayed. The strategic context of female agents' D-Day operations became clear only after liberation, when the full scope of their activities could be assessed. In the 72 hours before Allied forces landed on Normandy beaches, SOE agents across France coordinated 950 separate sabotage operations. Female agents conducted or directly coordinated 486 of them, 51%. Nancy Wake's network in the Auvergne destroyed 4 bridges on the main German supply route from southern France to Normandy, delaying the 157th Reserve Division by 18 hours. That delay meant the division missed the critical first day of combat, when German counterattacks might have pushed Allied forces back into the sea. Military historians estimate that 18-hour delay saved between 800 and 1,500 American lives on Omaha Beach. Lisa de Bissac's network in Normandy itself provided intelligence on German defensive positions that allowed Allied forces to avoid the most heavily fortified sectors. Her reports, transmitted between May 15 and June 4, 1944, identified 17 German strongpoints, 12 minefield locations, and 8 artillery positions. Allied planners adjusted landing zones based on her intelligence. The casualties avoided are impossible to calculate precisely, but General Dwight Eisenhower's post-war assessment noted, intelligence from agents in Normandy, particularly that provided by Lise de Bissac, allowed us to land forces in locations where German defenses were weakest. This intelligence contribution was worth at least an additional division in combat power. Yvonne Cormeau's radio transmissions from southwestern France provided the only reliable intelligence on German reinforcement movements toward Normandy in the week after D-Day. Between June 6th and June 13th, she transmitted 17 reports detailing troop movements, allowing Allied aircraft to bomb German columns while they were exposed on roads. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, moving from southern France to Normandy, should have arrived by June 10th. Constant Allied air attacks guided by Cormeau's intelligence delayed their arrival until June 15th. By then, Allied beachheads were secure. The adoption acceleration was documented in weekly SOE operational summaries. Week of June 6–12, 1944. Female agents transmitted 147 intelligence reports and coordinated 89 sabotage operations. Week of June 13–19, 203 reports, 127 operations. Week of June 20–26, 276 reports, 184 operations. By July, female agents were conducting more operations than all male agents combined. Not because male agents were ineffective, but because so many male agents had been captured while female agents survived. The demand for female agent operations exceeded capacity. Resistance groups across France requested SOE coordinators, specifically asking for female agents because they'd proven more effective at avoiding German countermeasures. By August 1944, SOE had requests for 73 additional female agents, but could deploy only 11. The training pipeline couldn't scale fast enough. Production statistics tell the expansion story. Between January 1943 and August 1944, SOE manufactured and delivered to France $47,000 Sten guns, 27,000 rifles, 3,000 Bren light machine guns, 750,000 grenades, 487 tons of plastic explosives, and 4,000 radio sets. Female agents coordinated delivery and distribution of approximately 38% of these supplies. 18,000 Sten guns, 10,000 rifles, 140 Brens, 285,000 grenades, 185 tons of explosives, and 1,120 radios. They didn't transport these supplies themselves. Resistance fighters did that, but female agents organized the networks that made transport possible. German intelligence recognized the problem they faced. A Gestapo memo from Paris headquarters dated July 19, 1944, and captured after liberation, stated, "British intelligence has infiltrated female agents across occupied France in numbers we cannot determine. These agents coordinate resistance activities with effectiveness that suggests military training and ongoing communication with London. Previous counterintelligence methods focusing on male suspects have failed to identify or capture these operatives. We believe they exploit gender assumptions. Our patrols and checkpoints screen men aggressively, while allowing women to pass with minimal scrutiny. This vulnerability must be addressed immediately." By the time the Germans recognized their mistake, it was too late. The memo reached field units on August 2, 1944. Paris was liberated on August 25. The period between German recognition and implementation of countermeasures was 23 days, far too short to develop new screening methods, retrain personnel, and deploy across occupied France. The psychological impact on German forces is harder to quantify, but appears in captured documents and post-war testimony. German soldiers interrogated after capture repeatedly expressed shock that women had been organizing attacks against them. Corporal Hans Dietrich, captured near Lyon in August 1944, told his interrogators, "We were told the resistance was poorly organized criminals and communist agitators. We didn't know British agents were coordinating them. We especially didn't know women were leading operations. If we'd known women were doing this, we would have questioned whether we could trust any French woman we encountered." That mistrust was precisely the strategic vulnerability female agents exploited. Every time a German soldier hesitated to suspect a woman, every checkpoint that waved through a female courier, every Gestapo interrogator who assumed a woman couldn't be dangerous, those assumptions created operational space where female agents moved freely. The cascade of tactical victories, built to operational success, built to strategic impact. At the tactical level, female agents saved lives through direct action. When Odette Sansom was captured in April 1943, she invented a story that she was married to her network commander Peter Churchill and that he was Winston Churchill's nephew. Neither claim was true. The Germans believed her, treating both her and Churchill as valuable hostages rather than executing them immediately. Both survived the war. At the operational level, female agents' intelligence allowed Allied forces to concentrate force where German defenses were weakest. At the strategic level, their sustained operations proved that resistance in occupied Europe was viable, sustainable, and supported by Allied commitment. The statistical comparison reveals the magnitude. From June 1940 to June 1944, male SOE agents in France had a 38% capture rate and an average operational lifespan of 7 months. Female SOE agents had a 15% capture rate and an average operational lifespan of 19 months. Female agents were 2.5 times more likely to complete their missions successfully. They transmitted 2.7 times more intelligence reports per agent. They recruited resistance fighters at 1.8 times the rate of male agents. The immediate impact was measured in tactical outcomes. Approximately 11,000 resistance fighters, organized and armed by female agents, 486 sabotage operations directly coordinated, 2,147 intelligence reports transmitted, 12 Allied airmen rescued and returned to service, and an estimated 4,200 German casualties inflicted through operations they coordinated. The operational campaign impact was documented in post-war military analysis. A 1946 U.S. Army study of D-Day operations concluded, intelligence provided by agents in occupied France, including notably effective contributions from female SOE agents, was essential to the success of the Normandy invasion. Without this intelligence, Allied forces would have faced significantly stronger German resistance with correspondingly higher casualties. The war-level strategic contribution was acknowledged by Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower in his post-war memoir. The work of the resistance forces throughout occupied Europe was coordinated and supported by special operations executive agents. These men and women risked everything, and many paid the ultimate price. Their contribution shortened the war by months and saved tens of thousands of Allied lives. The historical long-term impact changed how modern militaries conceptualized women's roles in combat. Before World War II, no nation allowed women in combat positions. The SOE's female agents proved that women could conduct the most dangerous military operations successfully. This precedent couldn't be reversed. Post-war debates about women in military service had to confront the reality that women had already fought, killed, and died with effectiveness equal to or exceeding male soldiers. The present-day descendants of SOE's female agents are everywhere. Modern special operations forces across NATO militaries include women. The CIA and Britain's MI6 employ female field officers in dangerous postings worldwide. Every female soldier serving in combat roles today operates in a profession that SOE's female agents proved women could master. But recognition came late and inadequate. Of the 39 female agents who served in France, 13 were captured by the Germans. Of those 13, 12 were executed. Tortured first, then killed. 4 were executed at Ravensbrück concentration camp, 3 at Dachau, 2 at Natzweiler-Struthof, 3 at Fresnes prison in Paris. Their names: André Borel, Diana Roden, Vera Ley, Sonia Olshanesky. Executed July 6, 1944 at Natzweiler-Struthof. Yolande Beekman, Madeleine Darmemont, Eliane Plumen, Noor Inayat Khan. Executed at Dachau. Dates uncertain between September-November 1944. Cecily Lefort, Denise Bloch, Violette Sabo, Lillian Rolfe. Executed at Ravensbrück in January-February 1945. When the war ended, Britain initially denied these women had served in combat roles. The official story was they were civilian support staff who'd been mistakenly in combat zones. This fiction maintained Britain's position that it didn't deploy women in combat. The families of executed agents received condolence letters that didn't mention their daughters, wives, or mothers' true service. The recognition question became a post-war scandal. Male SOE agents received military honors commensurate with their service. Female agents received civilian awards or nothing. The military establishment that had insisted women couldn't serve in combat roles now insisted they hadn't served in combat roles and therefore didn't merit combat decorations. The turning point came from the French, not the British. In 1945, France began awarding the Croix de Guerre, a combat decoration, to female SOE agents who'd served in France. The British government couldn't explain why France was decorating British citizens for combat service if those citizens hadn't served in combat. The bureaucratic fiction began collapsing. In 1946, Odette Sansom became the first woman awarded the George Cross, Britain's highest civilian decoration for gallantry. The citation read, "She refused to speak despite torture. She gave nothing to the enemy. Her courage was exceptional." But it was a civilian decoration, not a military one. Violette Szabo was awarded the George Cross posthumously in 1946. Her daughter Tanya accepted the award. Tanya was 4 years old. She'd barely known her mother. The award citation concluded, "Her courage and devotion to duty in circumstances of extreme danger contributed materially to the successful prosecution of the war." Virginia Hall received the Distinguished Service Cross from the United States in 1945. The citation noted she was the only civilian woman in World War II to receive this decoration. General William Donovan, head of the OSS, presented the award in a private ceremony. Hall requested no publicity. She'd already volunteered for OSS operations in Austria. She never spoke publicly about her service. Most female agents received no recognition until decades later. Pearl Witherington, who commanded 1,500 resistance fighters and engaged German forces in open combat, was offered an MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, a civilian honor. She refused it. Her letter to the War Office, dated 1946, stated, "There is no civilian in wartime. I did a soldier's job. I should be recognized as a soldier." The War Office didn't respond. In 1958, Britain finally acknowledged that SOE's female agents had served in military capacities. In 2006, exactly 62 years after D-Day, a memorial was unveiled at Thamesford Airfield, the base from which many agents flew to France. It lists the names of all SOE agents who died in service, including the 12 executed female agents. The opposition's admission of error came piecemeal over decades. General Montgomery never publicly acknowledged he'd been wrong about women in combat. He died in 1976, maintaining that women's proper role is supporting men in war, not fighting themselves. But in 1972, the British Army opened combat training to women for the first time. The decision memo cited SOE's female agents as proof that women could meet combat standards. The institutional policy changes rippled across decades. In 1948, women were allowed in permanent military positions. In 1992, women were allowed in combat aircraft. In 1994, women were allowed in combat ships. In 2016, women were allowed in ground combat units. Each change faced opposition, citing the same arguments used against SOE's female agents. Women lack physical capability, emotional stability, tactical judgment. Each change proved successful, demonstrating again that assumptions about limitations weren't based on actual capability. The immediate legacy appeared in post-war intelligence services. The CIA, founded in 1947, recruited female field officers from the beginning, something unprecedented in American intelligence. The first CIA officer killed in combat operations was CIA officer Carrie Tomlinson, killed in Iraq in 2003. She was following a tradition established by SOE's female agents 60 years earlier. Generation 2 legacy emerged in military policy. By 1965, the Vietnam War saw American women serving in combat zones, though not officially in combat roles. The bureaucratic fiction that women didn't fight was maintained, while women flew into active war zones, treated wounded under fire, and died when their positions were attacked. The SOE precedent made these deployments inevitable even while policy pretended women weren't in danger. Long-term legacy reached full realization in 2013 when the United States military formally ended its ban on women in combat roles. The policy change acknowledged what SOE had proven 70 years earlier. Women can conduct combat operations as effectively as men, and excluding them based on gender weakens military capability. Present-day applications extend beyond military service. Every woman working in hostile environments, war correspondents, humanitarian workers, diplomatic security, corporate security in dangerous locations, operates in roles that wouldn't exist without the precedent SOE's female agents established. They proved that gender doesn't determine capability. Individuals determine capability, and many individuals, regardless of gender, possess the intelligence, courage, and determination to succeed in humanity's most demanding challenges. The quantified total impact includes 39 female agents deployed to France between 1941 and 1945, with 13 captured and 12 executed. They transmitted approximately 2,147 intelligence reports to London. They organized approximately 11,000 resistance fighters. They coordinated 486 confirmed sabotage operations. Military historians estimate their intelligence and operations saved between 10,000 and 30,000 Allied lives by improving operational effectiveness and reducing casualties through better intelligence. The financial impact is harder to calculate, but one metric illustrates it. Each female agent cost Britain approximately £1,200 to recruit, train, equip, and deploy. That's equivalent to about £60,000 in current currency. The intelligence they provided guided operations involving tens of millions of pounds in military resources. The return on investment was extraordinary. The cultural spread was slower, but more profound. SOE's female agents changed what society believed women could accomplish. Before them, women in warfare was unthinkable. After them, it became undeniable. The shift from women can't to women did to women do took 60 years. But SOE's female agents initiated that transformation. The universal lessons from SOE's female agents resonate beyond gender and warfare. First, assumptions about limitations often reflect the limitations of those making assumptions, not the capabilities of those being assessed. Every institution that declared women incapable of clandestine warfare was wrong. They weren't wrong because they were malicious. They were wrong because they confused historical precedent with inherent capability. Second, desperate circumstances force innovation that comfortable circumstances resist. Britain deployed female agents not because enlightened leadership recognized gender equality, but because conventional approaches were failing catastrophically. Necessity overcame prejudice. Progress often requires crisis to break institutional inertia. Third, the most effective solutions come from unexpected sources. Virginia Hall succeeded because she didn't fit military expectations of what an agent should be. Her disability made her seem vulnerable and non-threatening. Her gender made her invisible to German screening. Her background outside military culture gave her different operational approaches. The best solutions often come from those who see problems differently because they've lived differently. Fourth, excellence compounds when given opportunity. SOE's first female agent succeeded. That success created opportunity for more female agents. Their success created more opportunities. The compound effect of proven capability created momentum that eventually overwhelmed institutional resistance. Fifth, courage isn't the absence of fear, but the commitment to act despite fear. Every female agent who parachuted into France knew the statistics. They knew capture meant torture and execution. They went anyway. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they believed their mission mattered more than their fear. Modern relevance extends to every field where assumptions about capability limit opportunity. Corporate leadership, technology development, scientific research, artistic creation. Every domain where people like you don't do things like this gets presented as fact rather than prejudice. SOE's female agents proved that capability exists wherever determination meets opportunity, regardless of whether that capability matches traditional expectations. May 2, 1941. A wet London evening. A woman with a wooden leg walking into an office to volunteer for impossible service. Fast forward 3 years. That woman's network had saved thousands of lives and helped liberate a continent. The impossible had become not just possible, but exemplary. Virginia Hall lived until 1982. She served in OSS operations in Austria after her France service. She joined the CIA when it formed, working as an intelligence analyst until 1966. She never sought publicity. She never wrote a memoir. She died quietly in Maryland, the state where she was born. Few knew what she'd done. Fewer understood its significance. The philosophical payoff isn't that women proved that they were as capable as men. It's that humanity proved it had been wasting half its potential by assuming limitations without testing them. SOE's female agents didn't just fight fascism. They fought against the boundaries society places on human capability. They won both wars. 39 women parachuted, sailed, and walked into Nazi-occupied France to do what military authorities declared impossible. 13 were captured. 12 were executed. 26 survived to see liberation. Their networks organized thousands of resistance fighters, transmitted thousands of intelligence reports, and coordinated hundreds of sabotage operations. Their contribution to Allied victory was essential, undeniable, and ignored for decades because acknowledging it meant admitting that institutional certainty about women's limitations was wrong. Today, the memorial at Valençay in France lists their names on a stone wall surrounded by gardens. Visitors can see the names, read the brief descriptions, and wonder what kind of courage it took to do what they did. The memorial doesn't convey the terror of parachuting into darkness, knowing you might be shot before you land. It doesn't convey the loneliness of living under false identity in enemy territory. It doesn't convey the calculated risk of every interaction, every checkpoint, every knock on the door. But the memorial does one thing perfectly. It lists their names. André Borel, Yolande Beekman, Denise Bloch, Yvonne Cormeau, Madeleine Damemont, Lise de Bessac, Diana Roden, Cecily Lefort, Vera Lee, Noor Inayat Khan, Eliane Pluman, Violet Szabo, Odette Sansom, Nancy Wake, Virginia Hall, and 24 others. They existed. They served. They fought. They won. The impossible became possible because 39 women refused to accept it couldn't be done. They didn't do it for recognition. Most received none during their lifetimes. They didn't do it for glory. Most sought anonymity after the war. They did it because when asked, "Who will stop Hitler?" they answered, "I will." And impossibly, miraculously, they did. Their story isn't just history. It's proof that every time someone says, "People like you can't do this," they're revealing their limitations, not yours. The D-Day girls proved that impossible is often just another word for untried, and when tried by those with courage, determination, and skill, the impossible becomes inevitable. The next time someone tells you something can't be done, remember the 30-year-old American woman with a wooden leg who limped into France and organized resistance networks that helped free a continent. Remember the secretary who became a commando. Remember the courier who commanded 1,500 fighters. Remember the radio operator who transmitted intelligence while the Gestapo hunted her. Remember that they were told it was impossible. Remember that they did it anyway. Remember that humanity's greatest achievements come from those who refuse to accept limitations that exist only in imagination. The D-Day girls didn't just fight a war. They expanded what humanity believed possible. That expansion continues every time someone proves that capability transcends expectation, that determination overcomes assumption, and that courage makes the impossible routine. 39 women. 39 impossibilities achieved. One lesson that echoes forever. Never tell anyone what they can't do until they've had the chance to prove you wrong. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that they probably will.